Hey guys, welcome back to Xcode Android lesson 4, or more like video lesson 4, lesson 5, I guess, week 5. Um, Today we're just going to be going over like more widgets that you can add to your app. Again, we're just going to review definitions, how widgets work, do an Android and iOS demo. I'm going to give you guys some more coding tips, more specifically about how you can code in groups, and then finally some resources that I'd recommend you guys check out. So first, just reviewing some definitions. A widget is a UI element of the app. So for example, your text labels, your buttons, images, even things like swipe detectors can be counted as widgets. If you look on this image to the right, in the red box, there's actually two different widgets being circled. So the first one is this text box called name, and then the second one is this text entry box. Next definition is just events. So an event is a user interaction with the app. So this can be anything from like clicking a button or like tapping on something or swiping up and down. And then finally, an event listener is a type of method that reacts to the event. So like if you click a button and the text label changes or something, the method that would change the text label would be called an event listener. So next, I'm just going to go over how widgets work in general for both Android and Xcode. So widgets are pretty complex classes that have like their own special methods and fields. And they also have their own special attributes. So for example, some widgets will have like background colors that you can change, or like text that you can customize, or things like number of rows. So basically for both Xcode and Android, they basically deal with widgets as their own classes that have like their own list of methods that you can call, and their own special fields that you can read. And then next is that attributes can be set through both the inspector or code. So you can either change or like customize your buttons, or like customize a different widget through things like main.storyboard or activity.xml. Or you can even customize them through coding. So that's just a heads up. So if you find like different solutions to the same problem online, like this might be why. And then finally, like each are connected to unique events. So like specific widgets have their own specific events. So like for buttons, they'll have an event called like on click. But like for a slider, there might be an event called like on value changed or something like that. And these events are all connected to event handlers. So finally, I'm just gonna be talking about the widgets we'll be going over. So we'll only be going over 3 widgets for this video. The first one is text, next is images, and then finally sliders. And also we're only going to be going over sort of the basics of these widgets. So like how you add them and how you can connect them to different event listeners to make like simple apps. All of these like widgets are very complex classes in their own right. So like it's very difficult to like go over them in full-on detail without making this video like a solid 2 hours long and very boring. Also, like these aren't the only 3 widgets that ever existed. There are a ton of widgets out there. Xcode and both Xcode and Android Studio allow you to make super complex apps with like a bunch of different UI elements. And all of them are very complex. And I don't want to make this video be like too long. So I would highly recommend you just like go out on your own and look for like widgets that are outside of these two. There are a bunch of tutorials out there for both iOS and Android programming. And they'll not only go into a lot more detail about like specific widgets, but also they'll also go over like more widgets that might be more relevant to the apps you're making specifically. So again, I'm just going to go over these 3 widgets because I feel like they sort of represent the diversity of widgets you can encounter and you can make. And then I'll be going over like how you can add them, how you can like read their values and whatnot. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is for Android Studio. Again, if you're planning to work with iOS instead, feel free to skip this part. So first, I'm just gonna go over a few points that I think are helpful when you're working with widgets in Android. The first thing is Android widgets are all part of this library called Android.widget. Second off, all widgets are a subclass of the view class. So these 2 are both things to keep in mind when you're like looking for Android documentation. So whenever like you're looking at a class, make sure it's part of Android.widget, just so that like you know you're looking at the right documentation. Second off, when you're like trying to change the UI layout or trying to see what the app looks like, the file you want to look at is activity.xml. And then the last thing is events are connected to event listeners in the attributes inspector. So you can basically connect events to event listeners through like the attributes in like activity.xml. And something I didn't write on here is that you can also do it through code. So both are valid. So next, let's go on to the actual Android demo itself. So I've gone ahead and I've created this new project called Demo App. And I've also added a few widgets already. So first, I have this text view called none. I also have this slider, and I've set the default value of the slider to 100, which I can do by just going to the attributes on the right side and looking up progress. Progress is just a fancy way, a fancy name Android uses to just call value. So I've set the progress to 100, and this is just the default progress of this slider. And then because Android likes to be extra difficult, they also call sliders seek bars. So you can basically find seek bars in the palette under widgets, and then you have seek bar over here. And finally, I've also set the max value of the seek bar to 100. So basically, what I want this app to do is I want it to, whenever I change the value or progress in the seek bar, I want it to basically resize the image down to a certain like percentage of the original size. So right now it's at 100% the original size. But if I drag it down to like 50, it'll basically make it so that this image is half size. And then finally, I have this, this widget called image view, and I've imported my own custom image. So I did this by basically going to the resource manager and then going to this category called drawable. And then I clicked the add button up here and I clicked on import drawables. And I've just like passed in my custom image. And then like when you click on the image, you can just go through next and then click import. So basically when you drag in an image view over here, it'll basically ask like, what image do you want to show? So I've just clicked on example, but that's basically how you set up an image view on Android Studio. So I basically have like these 3. So again, I basically have these 3 widgets already set up. And again, when you drag in a widget, make sure that you set at least 3 sides of the constraints. So that just so that like when Android Studio runs your app, it knows where all the widgets are, like where they should be located inside the app. So next, let's go look at code. So basically, again, I want to make an app that whenever the slider changes, the image should change, and also the text should update with like, oh, the new image size is blank % of the original size. So I basically created 5 fields that basically keep track of information I want. So first off is I want to keep track of my text view so that I can update it. Same idea with my image view. And then I also want to keep track of this one thing called layout params. So layout params are basically the class that holds the information to like the size of your widget. So like, for example, the height and the width. And then finally, I also want to just keep track of the original height and the original width. I don't want it so that like the new image size is based off like the previous size, because the size of the image is like the current size of image is always changing. So I want to make it so that the new size is based off the original size of the original image. So next, I'm just going to instantiate all of these fields. So for text, remember when you're trying to get a certain view, you can basically use this built-in method called findViewById. So remember that for all of these different widgets, you can basically set a custom ID for them. And that'll make it so that you can use findViewById to get the specific widget you want. So for my text, I basically use findViewById, and I set my text view over here. I set my text view over here to seekbar label. So if you want to get a specific ID to access the ID, you can do r.id.seekbarLabel. And then same thing for image. So find view by ID, image view. So finally, to get the layout params, I basically want to get them by using this method called get layout params. So get layout params, and then that will just return the parameters of the image view. And then I can use params to get the original height and the original width. So original height would be params.height, and then same idea for width. And then finally, I want to basically connect my, I basically want to connect my seekbar event listener with a method that will basically change the size of the image and update the text. So if I go to the official documentation for seekbar, you'll see that that seekbar actually has a special event listener called onSeekbarChangeListener. Basically, this listener will be called every time the value of the seekbar changes. So basically, say I open the app and I drag the circle like back and forth. Every time for every moment, the value of the seekbar changes. So like every time I drag it a little bit, this event listener onSeekBar change listener will be called. So I basically want to like set that button listener to like a specific, to like do the specific thing I want. So basically update the text and update the image size. Unfortunately though, for like the SeekBar, I can't exactly do it through attributes because there actually isn't like the SeekBar, like onSeekBar change listener isn't actually an attribute like, and so for SeekBar, so I can't exactly find it over here. So I'll have to set it in code. And I'm gonna do that by using this method called set onSeekBar change listener. And I'm gonna like create my own onSeekBar change listener class. So I'm just gonna do that by creating an anonymous class that implements onSeekBar change listener. So for onSeekBar change listener, in order to implement that interface, I basically have to override these three methods. So the first method is onProgressChange. OnProgressChange is basically the method that will be called every time I drag the SeekBar and the value or the progress of that SeekBar changes. The next one is onStartTrackingTouch. That's basically called when I start touching that green circle in the SeekBar over here. And then finally, on StopTrackingTouch, same, basically when I stop touching the green circle on the SeekBar. For these last two methods, I don't really want to have something special happen when I like start or stop touching the green circle. So I'm just gonna leave these empty. And then I'm just gonna add a comment of do nothing. Just so I know in the future that I don't really want those methods to do anything. So the method we're going to focus on is onProgressChange. So every time that value of the SeekBar changes, I want to update the text and the image size to reflect the change in value. So I'm going to quickly implement this method so that it will do just that. So basically, how I'm going to do that is I'm going to set the layout params to its new like height and width. And then I'm just going to use this this method in image called set layout params. And I'm just going to pass in params to it again. And then to update text, I'm just going to use set text. So I'm just going to set the text to image size is blank % of original. This warning is just that Android Studio doesn't really like it when you try to like hard code the text. They want you to like use their resources and add it to like their strings.xml. But I'm just gonna ignore this warning. And then finally, to actually set the the on seek bar change listener to this new listener I've implemented, I'm just gonna go first grab the seek bar instance. So just like with text view and image view, I'm gonna find the view by ID. That caught it, and I set the label of my seek bar to just seek bar. And then I'm gonna do seek bar dot set on seek bar change listener. And I'm just gonna pass in my new listener that I've implemented. So basically what all this code will do is when I run this in the simulator, it should first show this layout. So my text view, my seek bar or slider, and my image view down here. Then whenever I basically change the value in this slider, it'll be reflected in in the image size. So basically the image will shrink to the proper proportions, and then the text will be updated to tell me oh, the new image size is blank % of the original size. So let's check it out. All right, so it's loaded my app, demo app. And as you can see, whenever I slide this, it'll basically change the image view. You'll notice that whenever the size changes, it'll basically move the image a little. This is because when I click on the image view, you'll see that it's not really cropped properly. So the actual view is a rectangle, but the actual image is it's sort of smaller than the image view. So that's just why the position changes. I can basically fix that by changing my image view size so that it's basically the size of the actual image. I should be able to just rerun it like this. And now you'll see that that issue is fixed. So that is basically all for the Android demo.
So next, we're going to be talking about how widgets work on iOS. Widgets in iOS are part of the UI kit library. And also, they're all subclasses of the view class. So basically, like I've said before, all these widgets are their own separate class with their own special methods and attributes, and they're all part of this library called UI kit. In addition, if you want to edit your app layout or add new widgets to it, you should be looking in the main.storyboard file, and that'll let you change everything, change your widgets and whatnot. And finally, events have to be connected to event listeners through these things called outlets. So next, let's just get to the iOS demo. So right here, I've created a basic Xcode project called Demo App that should run on iPhone 11. And I've taken the time to just add all the widgets to main.storyboard. So first, we have this label called none. Next is a slider called, just a slider that I've set the default value to 1. And finally, I have this image view. And I've already taken the time to add an asset called example. So just a reminder, if you want to add your own widgets, you can click the plus button on the very top over here when you're in main.storyboard, and then Xcode will basically give you a list of anything you can just add to your storyboard. So you can search over here and you have like your more common views like labels, buttons, and a lot of different stuff. So you can just drag and drop those to your storyboard and be sure to like add all these constraints and whatnot so that Xcode knows where to place your views when it's running. So yep, that's all the widgets I have. And then next, we can take a look at the code. So for this application, I'm basically want to make an app that where whenever I change the slider, it'll display like the value of the slider in this label, and then also it'll basically scale the image down to like whatever the value is. So I've basically imported this library called core image, and what I'm doing is I basically want to run my image through like a special filter that will scale the image down without like changing the quality of the image, basically. So if you're interested in like how I do this technically, you can definitely look up core image and things like CI filter, which are basically really quick ways that Apple has given you to like do some really cool image processing. I won't really get into like the super fine details about that for now because it's a little advanced, and I would just want to focus on like the widget part of it. So if you go over to your inspector, so I basically click this upper right panel, and I click on something like my image view. I can also check out like my outlets by clicking on this icon. So this is basically your outlet inspector. Like I said before, you have to connect your events and your event handlers to outlets. And also like any sort of view or like widget that you want to sort of change or like read the value of, you also have to connect those to outlets too. And the outlet inspector is a really super useful way to basically tell you like, oh, my widget is connected to like which outlets is this view connected to. So in order to connect my views to their own outlets, I've basically can control click and then drag my my view to like my code. So basically, again, I've basically pressed control. I've clicked on like the image, and you can see like a blue line pop out, and then I'll just drag it and drop it to wherever in my code. If I drop it up here, it'll basically create an outlet where I can sort of change the values of the view. And if I drop it down here, it'll create an event listener. So I can control for my image. I basically want to be able to sort of change the size and scale of this image, right? So I want to make an outlet up here so I can basically read in like what size is this image and what's the new size of the image. So I'm going to control and drop. And then I'm going to name it something like image view. And then we can connect it. So then Xcode has basically gone ahead and created a new variable image view. And if I actually go into main.storyboard and I look at my outlet inspector, it's also added an outlet to image view. And then next, I can do the same thing for my slider. So for my slider, I want to do two things. I want to first be able to read the value of the slider. And I also want to make it so that every time the values change in the slider, I want it to update the scale of the image. So if it's changed to like 0.5, I want to make the image half size. So I'm going to drag and drop it twice. So first I've clicked and dragged it up here. So, and I'm going to name a variable called slider. And this will basically let me read the value of the slider. Next, you've noticed I already have a pre-made outlet called onValueChange over here, but I still need to connect it to my slider. So I'm going to again Control-click, drag, and then you see it highlights this entire method. So I'm just going to drop it over here. And over here, the circle has been filled, which means that I've connected this to my slider. So basically, every time the value of my slider changes, this method will be called. And then finally, I need to make it so that I can update the text of this label. So I've Control-click, and I'm going to drag it up here. Let me call it something like text. There we go. So basically, just keep in mind that if you want to connect an event to your, an event listener, and if you want to be able to read data off of your widgets, you have to Control-click, drag and drop your views into your code. And then another thing to keep in mind too is that it can be pretty difficult to delete outlets. So let's say I've changed my mind and I don't want to change my text anymore. Logically, what you would do is you would just delete your text variable, right? And you'd think that would sort of delete the outlet too. But actually, Xcode doesn't do that. If I go over here and I look in my outlet inspector for my label, you'll see that actually doesn't delete the outlet. So you have to delete it yourself over here by clicking the X button. So just keep in mind that if you ever delete your outlets and whatnot, you have to not only delete it in your code, you also have to delete it in the outlet inspector. So that's just, it can be a little confusing. And if you don't do it correctly, it can actually mess up your app. So I'm going to add this back in. And then this way, when I click run, I should have an app that can basically scale my image for me. All right, so again, if I drag and drop, or if I drag the slider up and down, it can resize the image. So that's it for the demo. Just remember, again, summarizing what we've gone over, basically you can add different widgets by clicking this plus button, dragging and dropping into your storyboard. Make sure you always constrain your views. That way, Xcode will know where to place them. Finally, remember to Control-click, drag and drop your views into your code to connect them as variables or as event listeners. And then make sure to always keep track of your outlets through the outlet selector. So you can find it by clicking this icon in the upper right-hand corner, and then clicking on this circly icon. And then these are just a list of all your outlets. So yeah, I would highly recommend you explore this view list. there are a ton of different things that Xcode lets you do. So, and these are like just three different widgets in like out of a lot of different widgets you can add. Yep, so that's it for the iOS demo.
So the last thing I want to talk about is just giving you guys some more coding tips on how to work in groups. So for most of your projects in school, they'll be like done individually. So it can be a little hard to like learn how to code in teams. I've personally had a lot of different experiences coding in different sizes of teams, both like for my internships, for hackathons, and even for some school projects that happen to also be group projects. So these are just some tips I think will really help you guys sort of learn how to code together. So the first recommendation I have is to learn how to use version control. More specifically, learn how to use Git. Git is basic. If you don't know what version control is, it's basically a tool that allows you to not only keep track of different versions of your code. So like, so every time like you update code, you'll be able to track the changes in your code, but also when you have like multiple teams of or multiple groups of people working on the same code. So it'll help you track like who's working on what feature, who added what changes to the code, and also if like someone's added a change, how do I update my code that's on my computer? Git is a really helpful tool to do that. It's also used by like a lot of companies. So when I worked on code in my internships, I actually used Git. And I would recommend checking out this site called GitHub. It's basically lets you keep track of like your code online through Git. The second piece of advice I have is just communicate with your team regularly. So whenever I'm working on code in a group, I'll basically set a time like every week that basically I'll be on a group call with my team members, and we sort of update each other on like what issues we're having, what we've gotten done so far, and just like what we want to do for the next week. This way, like you'll be able to keep track of like first what problems you have, the progress you've made, and also what goals you want to set to like get done for like the next week or the next few days or something. So basically, make sure you always communicate with your other team members so that they not only know you're like working on the code, but also they know like what problems you're having and like what stuff you've done so far. Next, work on separate parts of the code. So you don't want like the two people working on the same feature, because what will happen is like, say I'm like working on adding a cool new button to my app, and my team member Jane is also doing the same thing, and we implement it different ways. Then the issue becomes like, oh, whose code should we use? Like, should the app use my code or should it use my team member's code? And then you'll have to like waste a lot of time basically combining your code together or like discussing whose code is better. And you don't really want to get in that. You don't want it so that like two people are working on the same thing, because it'll basically be like you're sort of dedicating too many resources to the same thing. So it'll be easier if like you have certain people working on specific features. That way, like there won't be any arguments of like my code is better and your code is buggy or something. Or there won't be any hours wasted of like, how do we combine our code so it fits together and stuff like that. And then finally, spend some time coding together. So like, I think it's always really helpful to code with other people, even if you're not working on the same features, because it's a good way to sort of like make progress together. And also you can help each other with like issues you're having. So like if someone's not as familiar with like Swift and they're having bugs, then they can like, you can work it out together in real time without them like sitting on an issue for like a week. And then you sort of like realizing they have this issue a week later in the next team meeting or something. That way, like you guys can make progress together and there's a way to like get quick help. And then finally, I also have quite a few resources. So the first half is just different Xcode resources I found. Whenever I'm working on Xcode apps, I found this site, Ray Wenderlit, particularly useful. They have like a ton of different iOS and Swift tutorials that help you basically walk you through a bunch of different iOS apps you can make. And this one specifically is like they're making a game app, but they also walk you through the entire progress of like working with storyboards. So I personally found that very helpful. And they also like go a little further in depth than like the demo that we did today. Next is just Apple Human Interface Guidelines. So like this is their official guidelines on like different widgets and whatever. And then finally, like official Apple docs about UIKit. This is a good resource for like if you're curious about like what methods that your specific widget has. I would really recommend you check this out. And second, for Android, the first thing I have is just the official Android tutorial on building an app. I think I've listed this in the lesson 2 demo, lesson 2 resources, but again, like this is very helpful. They'll basically walk you through how to build a basic like app with like buttons and like text entry, and also just the official Apple or Android UI overview, just a little bit more about Android UIs. And then finally, I've also listed basic references for Git. So the first one is a tutorials point website that talks all about the, it's basically a website that has everything you want to know about Git. I link you to like the basic Git concepts that I think you should definitely go over. And then finally, 2 different Git cheat sheets. I actually use these a lot because Git is pretty complicated, but these are these basically list the very basic and commonly used commands you would use for Git. And then finally, if you're stuck, feel free to join the GirlsCodeIt Discord. If you want to DM me directly, I'm the only Jessica on the server, so you can like look me up in the members list. And then finally, like if you want one-on-one like video call tutoring, you can visit the GirlsCodeIt tutoring page, and you can request like a one-on-one tutoring session if you're having any trouble with your code. Feel free to like contact GirlsCodeIt or contact me directly if you're having any trouble. I'll try my best to help you. If I'm not exactly sure what's going on with your code, I'll definitely try my best to like send you resources and whatnot. And that's it. Thank you.